It started subtly, as these things often do. I'd just moved into this old adobe house on the outskirts of Santa Fe. It had character, you know. Thick mud brick walls, deep-set windows, and a silence that felt ancient. I was looking for peace, a place to escape the noise of the city. What I found was something else entirely. The first few nights were perfect. I'd sit on the porch, watch the desert sky bleed into a tapestry of stars, and feel the day's stress melt away. Then the scratching began. It only happened when the lights were out. The first time, I was lying in bed, hovering in that space between wakefulness and sleep. It was a faint sound, like a mouse scrabbling behind the plaster. Soft, careful, almost shy. I sat up, listening. The sound stopped. I turned on my bedside lamp. Not a single mark. I figured it was just the house settling, or my imagination playing tricks on me in a new, unfamiliar place. I dismissed it and went back to sleep. The next night, it happened again. This time, it was louder, more deliberate. Scratch, scrape, pause. It wasn't random. It sounded like someone was trying to write, slowly, painstakingly, with a sharp nail. The sound traveled along the wall, starting near the floor and moving upwards. Again, I flipped on the lights, and again, the wall was pristine. The silence that followed was heavy, almost mocking. I started to feel a knot of unease tighten in my stomach. This wasn't the house settling, this was something else. I spent the next day trying to rationalize it. Old pipes, pests. I even called an exterminator, who found no evidence of any infestation. He looked at me like I was crazy when I tried to describe the sound. "This house is solid as a rock," he said, patting the thick wall. "You won't hear a thing through this." But I did, and it was getting worse. That third night, I decided to conduct an experiment. I turned off all the lights, sat in a chair in the middle of my bedroom, and just waited. My phone was in my hand, its flashlight ready. For a long time there was only the sound of my own breathing, the thumping of my heart. Then, it started scratch, scrape, right next to me. The sound was so close, so intimate, it felt like someone was whispering a secret into the wall itself. I held my breath, forcing myself to wait, to let it continue. The scratching went on for what felt like an eternity. It was rhythmic, forming patterns. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I hit the flashlight button, and there it was. For a split second, before the light seemed to bleach it away, I saw it. Thin red lines, like scratches made with a shard of rust-colored glass. They were messy, crude, but they formed a shape. A letter. My initial, the J of my name, Jacob. My blood ran cold. I stared at the blank wall. The image burned into my mind. I hadn't imagined it. It was real. The nights that followed became a terrifying ritual. I was too afraid to sleep in the dark, but too morbidly curious to leave the lights on. Each night, I would wait, listening. The scratching would start, and I would wait as long as I could bear it before turning on the light. And they always vanished, the instant the light hit them, leaving behind a perfectly clean wall and the faint, coppery smell of old pennies. I was unraveling. I stopped sleeping. My days were a blur of exhaustion and paranoia. I would stare at the walls in the bright New Mexico sun, trying to find any trace of the nightly visitations, but there was nothing. The house was quiet, peaceful, basking in the daylight as if it held no secrets. But I knew better. I knew what it did when the sun went down. I felt like I was being haunted. But not by a ghost. I was being haunted by the house itself. It was learning me. One night, I reached my breaking point. The scratching started, more frantic than ever before. It wasn't just spelling my name anymore. It was writing it over and over. Jacob, Jacob, Jacob. The sound was a frantic cacophony, echoing from all four walls at once. It was like being inside a drum with a dozen invisible hands scratching, carving, claiming the space around me. I squeezed my eyes shut, my hands over my ears. But I could still hear it, feel the vibrations through the floor. I waited. I don't know why, but I felt a desperate need to see it, to see the final result. I waited longer than I ever had before, letting the scratching crescendo into a frenzy and then, finally, fall silent. My hand was trembling as I reached for the lamp. I took a deep breath and flicked the switch. My heart stopped. It wasn't just my name anymore. The entire wall, from floor to ceiling, was covered. My name was written hundreds of times, in overlapping, jagged red script. It looked like a madman's diary. Jacob, Jacob, Jacob. Some were neat, some were sloppy, some were barely legible. But it was all my name. I stood there, frozen, unable to scream, unable to move. I was staring at a monument to my own terror. I don't know how long I stood there, but eventually, the first rays of dawn started to creep through the window, and as the sunlight touched the wall, the writing began to fade. It didn't disappear instantly like before. It receded, like ink soaking into paper, the hundreds of red names slowly dissolving back into the plain, white plaster. Within minutes, the wall was completely blank, clean as if it had never happened. I felt a wave of relief so powerful it almost brought me to my knees. Maybe it was over, maybe the sunrise had banished it for good, but as I finally let my eyes scan the rest of the room, I saw it. On the wall opposite my bed, the one wall that had remained untouched all night, was a single, fresh sentence. It was written in the same thin, red script, but this one wasn't fading. It was dark, clear, and permanent. It looked like it had always been there. It said, "Now we know how to spell you." I didn't pack a bag, I just grabbed my keys and ran. I drove until the sun was high in the sky and the adobe house was just a memory in my rearview mirror. I never went back. Sometimes, late at night, when it's too quiet, I can almost hear it, a faint scratching sound, far away. And I wonder if they know how to spell my name. What are they going to write next?